Me being here brings this up for you? Yes, that's how trauma works. It's just, how is an illiterate person, an emotionally, psychologically illiterate person, who has been trained to be illiterate by their therapists, how exactly are they going to deal with that, if not go insane? Because if I say, you're right, your voice is raised an octave, your eyes are darting back like the most panicky thing I've ever seen, you won't look me in the eye, your body is shaking, you're right, nothing is going on, then I am becoming part of a collusion and an insanity protocol that I don't understand. And perhaps you'll calm down if I lie and agree with you and say, you're right, you're right. Everyone darts their eyes back and forth from time to time. Everyone looks as if a nuclear holocaust is around the corner when their partner looks them in the eyes. Of course, nothing's going on. I apologize. I apologize. Foolish me. Here I thought you were having feelings. I'm just an empath. I'm always wrong when it comes to other people's feelings. So if I had done that, maybe she'd have calmed down. But that relationship ended because I was traumatically illiterate, my partner was traumatically illiterate, and my therapist, in this case Ann Watts, was traumatically illiterate. That's sad if I extrapolate that out. So I've been to Findhorn, a spiritual community, read hundreds of growth-oriented books in all manners of field, worked with 40 therapists, hung out with growth-oriented people, and am traumatically illiterate until a stranger in a cafe at age 40 gives me the clue that no amount of money, time, and effort, with therapy had ever given me. Well, I don't think that's random. One therapist being traumatic illiterate, fine. Another one, fine. Another one, 40? 40? Didn't think to recommend the body keeps the score? Not one? Not one? It's astounding. So, anyway, unconscious lovers, reactive lovers. You try and deal with something like this and they have fits. So, addictive lovers, whether it's, addictive to lying or this, that, and the other. Sociopathic lovers, meaning when I go into traumatic states, it's very, very, very sad. Particularly since I have, early childhood attachment disorder, meaning it's very hard to make the transition from being really vulnerable and close to separating. And the best way to do that is to partner, is to have someone say, hey, Dane, I'd like to wrap this up. How do you feel? And is there anything you need before we disengage? That's a really easy, respectful way to disengage with me. And it lets me breathe in. It lets me feel secure. It lets me go deep emotionally. And then I can say, well, this is very sudden for me. Give me 15 minutes and just hold me. And then we'll say goodnight. And anyone that does that, the relationship is preserved. Now, this is what I call partnering around the end. In our cult, we partner around the beginning. Kind of partnering, meaning if you look at the various templates out there, one template is whoever nags the woman the most gets the date. That's one. And it's actually surprisingly effective, so it trains men to be predatorial nags. Another is whoever is cool and shows the least interest gets the date. As with my friend Minnie, who, a nickname, I won't talk about her real name, but who had a nice dating profile. And what attracted me is she said she was interested in quality time, which is my love language. So I wrote to her, and 3 days went by, not a peep. So I wrote to her again. I said, I am disengaging from the conversation. The only thing that interested in me about you was your statement that you had and wanted quality time. Well, you obviously don't have the time to even reply to a message in 3 days. That's not quality time. That's when I get around to it time. And that's normal America. I'm not looking for normal America. I'm looking for quality time. So as soon as I rejected her, within an hour, she was hot to trot, because that's how Mini behaves. As soon as you say you're, and the same thing was true when I disengaged. We had our date rapidly once I was not interested, and then we had our date, and she was coy and wanted to kind of end it a little bit early. And I said, this doesn't seem like a solid thing that I can get my teeth into. So let's have this be the last date. And she was an award-winning author, and she wanted to read one of my books. So I said, okay, here's one of my books. Well, she read my books, and because I had said that I didn't want to date her anymore, she was incredibly enamored. She was more enamored with my book than she was with me, I think, because in a sociopathic and chauvinistic world, ideas are much more important than feelings. So she had hugged me, cuddled with me, talked with me about feelings, and was not interested. But ideas like that, my, what a smart person you are. You see, I'm not interested in feelings. I'm one of those feminists who understand, as an award-winning author with a psychological degree from a Ivy League university, I might add, and a rich woman. I understand that ideas change the world. Masculine thinking at its best, right? So I'm not interested in your feelings, your needs, your inner child, all that. No. But oh my goodness, your ideas, they're brilliant. So she's in love with my ideas and could care shit about my feelings. Well, she was very aggressive now. You are going to date me. No, you can't give up on me. This is great. So she was very, very interested because I wanted nothing to do with her. And so there's that template. But there's very few templates that cooperate collaboratively. That I really appreciate you for reaching out. I'm concerned about this. Could you clarify this bit? I'm happy about this. I'd like to talk about this and this. And partner to connect, and then partner to transition out. Like this bit, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Could we wind this up in the next 30 minutes? And in a good way for you too. That's not how American women behave. I've got to go. I remember one woman, we're in the living room, She's pacing around doing various things that tell me she's very self-absorbed and not really interested in me. She says, I've got to go. And I said, really? I said, this way of exit is very bad for me. And she looks at me indignantly. It's like, I've got to go. It's like, fine, you've got to go. But you're not including me in any way, so I think this will be our last interaction. Because we partnered to begin this, and you're ending this unilaterally and without regard for me. You're just disconnecting spontaneously and there's just no partnering around it. She said, oh, I've got to go. And I said, fine, this will be our last interaction. Off you go. And I dealt with, of course, the fact that it feels disorienting and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, fine. That's our last interaction. Well, she goes home, integrates, and wants to see me again. I said, I don't want to see you because I'm not a part of any part of the relationship where you have something like that. You don't include me. And it didn't feel good. And I told you it didn't feel good, and that doesn't matter. So not only do you not include me, but you understand that this doesn't work for me at all, and you still don't include me. And you understand that I don't want to do that, and you still walk away. But because you, on your own, decide that I'm a great guy after the fact, you don't care about any of that. You don't apologize. You're not saying you're going to change. You just want to see me again. Oh, she was furious. Furious. Because I wouldn't interact with her on her terms. You won't interact with me on my terms. Do I not have any equal say in this? No. So, sociopathic, self-absorbed, lying. I will do this and this. You didn't do that. Oh, well, you know me. Yes, I do. I'm in the first 3 days of knowing you, you've broken this and this and this. Well, you know me. Well, yeah, but that's not going to work for me. What do you mean? It's no big deal. I thought we were talking about me. It is a big deal. I do what I say I will do. I haven't lied to you once in 3 days. I haven't lied to a single lover or friend. No. You see, and this, so there's a tremendous amount of willful ignorance amongst males and females in our cult in the lover dynamic. And a lot of it is very hurtful. When we come to high, as I say, I picked high as my primary community. And there is no language in high about sexual abuse. There's no language about chauvinism. There's no language about addiction. There's no language about what love is and is not. Now, these are 4 of the most primary tenets in whether you can have a relationship at all, let alone a sustainable win-win relationship. Now, when you have no language, you have no attention, and you have no consciousness in those areas. This means that it is guaranteed to hit you sideways, as it did in almost every one of my high relationships. Trauma, sexual abuse, addiction, compulsion, emotional illiteracy, chauvinism hit my relationships with other high community members sideways, with no language to facilitate the technology of figuring out the difference between the person and their addiction, the essence and their trauma, the conscious intention and the compulsive behavior. There's no way to parse that out when you don't have language. Now, much more upsetting, in my opinion, is the understanding of why that level of ignorance is there after 40 years. Because I have attempted in 2 waves of education, in 3 waves, to educate facilitators about trauma, about sexual abuse, about shame, and about different structural and policy issues. And I have been met with a defense system of willful ignorance and passive-aggressive defense. That is one of the most impressive defense systems I've ever encountered. I mean, barbed wire after barbed wire fence. And one of the easiest ways to see if someone's defending something is if they make you do 10 times as much work as they do. So you know someone doesn't want to have an intimate relationship if you have to call them 10 times for them to maybe call you once. You know, this is my problem with high men. You know, it's not just, lovers. With high men, hello, oh, how nice to hear from you, Dane. I was just thinking about you. Oh, how nice to hear from you, Dane. I was thinking about calling you. I was thinking about it. I didn't do it, but I was thinking about it. Now, this went on for 40 men. 40 men, 10 years, all of them were just thinking about calling me. And they never did. Not once. Not one person. Never did. So one day, there were 5 of them all doing that at the moment, and one day, I just said, I am never going to call those 5 men again. If they ever get around to actually calling rather than just thinking about it, I will, of course, return the call. But that's the end of it. And they were so relieved not to have an intimate relationship with another man. Wonderful. They never called once. Not one of them. Not ever. Not in 5 years. I would be curious to find out how many of them were just thinking of calling me if 10 years later I called some of them up. Oh, right, Dane, that's so interesting. I was just telling my wife about you. But that's a defense. If you want to wear someone down, make them do all the work in a given terrain. Now, high is going to make a great deal of effort, of course, if they want me to recruit workshops or donate money to High Global or this. Oh, yeah, they'll make the effort there. But to grow their skills in an understanding of shame or their negative impact or what their sexual abuses are, no. And you can see that more specifically with, as I mentioned, on the one hand, the legal contract that says you will never tell anyone, even a therapist, I will never tell anyone about what happened with Peter Sandhill and me. I will never sue High. Dane, that's the contract they wanted me to sign. It's very similar to a Scientology non-disclosure, thing when someone is trying to exit. They're trying to wear you down and make it as humiliating and difficult as possible and all the things. And it's the whole protocol is if you leave on your own initiative, you're a suppressive person and you're going to be punished and all that. But if you leave through the proper channels, they're going to extract more money from you, wear you down, require this, and a non-disclosure that promises that you'll never tell anyone about all the bizarre and sick things that happened. And so when High sued me for publishing on a website material that they ethically needed to be telling their community, you see the real defense in action, because they won't apologize. That would take effort and vulnerability on their part. They won't read emails because that would imply that it might be a high issue that a high facilitator sexually abused a high participant. They won't refund the money even after the sexual perpetrator, Peter Sandhill, did apologize. So I'm really sorry for blah, 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 blah. I'm so sorry that even though I've taken $6,000 of your money to abuse you, I'm not going to refund it. That's how sorry I am. It's like you go to Best Buy to fix your computer screen that comes back with a broken keyboard and still no fixed computer screen. You paid them $2,000, okay? We're really, 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 really sorry. Here's your laptop, and we're keeping your money. But I paid you to fix the screen, not to damage the keyboard. Yes, we're really sorry about that. Really sorry about it. You have no idea how sorry we are. That's why we're going to keep your money as a memento to remind us of how much regret we have of your heartbreak, of your PTSD, the confusion, the health crisis. Oh my goodness, we're so sorry. And, every one of those $6,000, we're just going to keep that money because that's the kind of people we are, committed to a world where everyone wins. That's the kind of people we are. So, bye. And when you realize that they will sue you to shut down a website that talks about the issue, but not offer a single dime of competent, licensed trauma and sexual abuse support by someone with no conflict of interest in the dynamic. No, Peter Sandhill and the facilitators got together, decided it wasn't a high issue, decided to keep hiring Peter and not tell anyone, decided to shush the thing up if at all possible, and decided that since Anne was my main therapist, she would be the best person to influence me into not telling anyone, and that her job was to listen to all my feelings and to get me not to tell anyone. Not to teach me about trauma. No. Not to get Peter to do a refund. Not to get High to apologize. No. Not to educate the public. But to keep me quiet. Because that's the kind of thing that needs to happen in a school committed to human awareness. Committed to into me you see. No, not to into us we see. Into you we see. We see your flaws, and we want you to understand you egged Peter on. He didn't want to sexually abuse him. Boy, my goodness, when you went high on those psychedelics, he didn't know what hit him. Poor guy. Here he is, normal consciousness, being paid $175 an hour. Here, you fall in love with him, high on psychedelics, your first psychedelic experience. He didn't know. He was just trying to do his job, right? But we've got to keep that secret, you see, because other people wouldn't understand what a loving and great guy he is. They just wouldn't get it, It's like, I don't get it either. It's like, seemed like you escalated a romantic relationship, violated all your high agreements and marital agreements, turned me into an enemy, got my account shut down, took away my primary resource for love and belonging, totally fucked with my mind on how to trust a therapist when that's hard enough with fucked up parents. And then you left me there lonely, heartbroken, unintegrated, and regressed with PTSD so that you could cover your asses while taking money as a public nonprofit. Not very nice, but you love me so much, don't you? You couldn't possibly apologize for any of that because we did it because we loved you. And we want to keep it secret because we don't want anyone else finding out just how loving we are. I mean, who knew you could have sex with your therapist? That's real love. And sacrifice, going out on a limb for our customers. So this is part of the dynamic. But it's not just the facilitators. You see, the facilitators have what's called a largely paper board, a board of directors that has been chosen because they're going to meet the legal requirements for a public nonprofit, but they're going to do what the facilitators advise them to do. So the facilitators call up the board, we need a vote on this and this because this is what's good for high, and they will vote that. And if you try and approach the board directly, they will rebuff that because they're not really a competent independent board that's interested in understanding data and learning what's going on in the community. They might get in trouble with mom and dad. And so the board is, of course, complicit in learning that a high facilitator sexually abused a high participant under the influence of psychedelics for money, and then further added to the abuse by shaming and blaming, and then giving the message that it wasn't even worth a refund, that no competent help should be provided, and it's just fine by us if a participant's life tail spins down into those dark pain places because we don't want to go there. We don't even want to speak about them. We're positive. We're upbeat. We're the room of love. The room of unconscious addiction, unconscious lying, unconscious trauma, emotional illiteracy, lots of sex, and escalated abuse. But let's just call that love because in a materialistic cult, we all know that love is a euphemism for sex, and sex is a euphemism for love. And do you fuck more at high? Absolutely. Even with the teachers. So, acquaintances, in this whole dynamic, acquaintances are part of the circle, part of the pain and addictive circle. Now, if I start going into this pain and talking about, I'm overwhelmed here, I'm confused about this, and I feel, so sad over here, I can barely speak and breathe in this arena. Acquaintances are not interested. I've watched American acquaintances, and I go up in social rank for having sex. I go up in social rank for making money. I go up in social rank for traveling. I go up in social rank for talking articulately. These things I go up in social rank about. I also go up in social rank for dress and appearance. That's another thing. I don't usually do much of it, but if I do, I go up in rank. So this is what my acquaintances in this cult want to talk more about. They have endless time. Oh, my goodness, tell me more. I mean, what did she do then? Oh, my goodness, my goodness. Now, you talk about anything real, and there are history. So that's part of the circle. If you want to exist, you have to show up in the little box in which people will allow you exist. Now, you can exist outside there. It's just not going to be welcome with any particular person. You can't show up at the sex party and talk about sexual abuse. Not welcome at the sex party. Kills the mood. You can't show up at the hot tub party and talk about sexual abuse. Kills the mood. Can't show up in a social event. Hey, good to see you. How are you? Can I get you a drink? Yeah, I'm feeling a bit depressed. I'm a bit overwhelmed. I'm not sure really who to talk to about this. When your own therapists betray you, it's like, where do you go then? And I'm just a bit lost here. Well, have a nice seat in the corner. I'm sure you'll feel better. When you're ready to be upbeat, come back and join the circle. And so acquaintances are clear in their vote for titillating minutia and avoiding anything meaningful. Now, the public, the general public, whether it's, first of all, it's usually, involved in business, in terms of, but if you just say hi, now there's a whole school of our generation which goes out of its way to not say hi and not even smile. And if you go to other cultures around the world where they're warm and welcoming, it's lovely, but you can tell the Americans and to some extent Westerners by the fact that they will go out of their way not to say hi back, not to smile, etc. So this is, one aspect of the degree of socio people, empathy versus pathology. The pathology is when you spend more energy, more muscles in the face to not smile. And it takes energy, by the way. Lack of smiling takes energy. Smiling is easy. And moving, it feels great, and you get more energy. If you smile, you had more energy than when you began. You feel better, and you smile. It's great, and you have a warmer rapport. You feel safer. It's what you need. It's what your body needs. Even if you put a pencil in your mouth, try it. Put a pencil in your mouth. You instantly feel better. Now, to not do that when someone smiles at you takes work. And boy, do we work at communicating that I don't give a damn about you. I'm the only important thing. We work in the West in this category. And so you can find the Westerners on the Thai beaches, because they're the only ones who can pull it off. It's quite a feat. Do you know how many muscles have to be frozen in just the right way not to smile when someone smiles at you on a warm, sunny beach? It's an incredible accomplishment. And boy, do people in the West work on it. So I don't even bother mentioning it. I don't even bother communicating to Westerners for the most part because the statistics are so miserable. The more I smile at a passersby just for fun to lift depression or lift the grief or the idea that somehow we're all walking around with our own pains and nobody's doing anything about it. And they can't do anything about it because they're in denial about it. Let's just at least smile. And the more I do that in the West, the more people avoid me as a statistical norm. So that's the vote of the public. Now, the business will, of course, smile and be engaging if that's what you want. They'll follow you. They'll mimic and adjust and chameleon to try and get your money. because money is more important than people or who I am really. So how are you? Well, I'm great. Well, you seem depressed. Well, I am very depressed, but customers don't want to hear that. So I say great. And it's like, okay, so you're doing your job to get the money. And so this is a circle. And I want to spend a little bit of time in this, this piece. It's what I talked about earlier, but I finally found the notice about how it was that the high facilitators, 4 of my therapists, the leaders of my community, etc., hurt me as much as they did. Because it is a human need to have love and belonging. And while it was my choice amongst all the communities I could have picked, I picked the high community as my primary source to build as a resource of love and belonging. So I was more known in that community than in any other community. More of my American lovers came from that community than any other community. I learned about sex in that community. Because what I learned from my parents was that sex was a disaster and stay away from it. And so I did until age 28 when I went to high. I stayed away from sex. I didn't want any part of betrayal and lies and tantrums and screaming and you creep and I didn't want any of that. I didn't want to be doing it. I didn't want it being done to me. So I stayed away from sex until high, and I was told by Lauren Campbell, another of my therapists who listened a lot and didn't say much, but when I said that I'd never been sexual and I was curious what that was about, he said, well, there is this group, you might want to check them out. And so I'd chosen them as a primary source for love and belonging. And I'd experienced a number of significant moments over the 10-year period in the 30 lover relationships, in the 30 workshops, in the total 100 high events, in the working with 4 facilitators. And that leads to a loyalty. You know, you can buy oxygen tanks from a number of companies, but once you've settled on a supplier, and you're underwater, and that is your supplier, you have a certain loyalty to the relationship with the supplier of your oxygen because it's a need. And love and belonging is a need. Now, one of the loyalties that come when you do therapeutic work. Now, remember, a therapeutic relationship is one that is completely imbalanced. You're driving to the therapist to pay them money to tell them your most vulnerable feminine secrets. That's what they're called, confidential. I'm not going to tell anyone about who you are. Your secret, your feminine side, is safe with me. I won't tell a soul. So your secret, that you are a feminine person, despite all of your cool attributes, you're feminine as well, that shameful of most shameful secrets, is all there out with the therapist. And in a cult like ours, that shames and denigrates the feminine since birth, it is profoundly beneficial to have a therapist, whether it's just for the money or because they actually care. Tell you that your feminine self is not a piece of shit, that there's some value there, that they'd like to see you again, meaning the feminine persona, they'd like to have that back within boundaries, of course, 50 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever is affordable. They would like to be there again, if you can afford it. So come back and we'll see you next week. Now, in a certain way, a therapist in our culture has a monopoly on feminine truth. I can tell you from dating 100 women, many of them sensitives, some of them therapists, some of them high interns, that leading with feelings is not what dating is about in our culture. It's just not. You say, "How are you doing?" and people tell you what they did and da-da-da-da-da, or they say nothing. Well, what about all those thoughts and feelings? 60,000 thoughts a day, all the corresponding feelings. Did you notice this part in our relationship? Do you feel more love for me on this date than you did last date? Is the trend building? I don't know. Now, no woman in the history of women has ever asked me, "Dane, what is your love language?" No woman in the history of women, either in written form, verbal, video, you name it, has ever said, "Dane, how can I make you feel completely and totally loved? And by the way, here's how you can make me feel completely and totally loved." No woman has ever asked me how I'd like to end an interaction or a relationship. No woman has told me, "Dane, I'd like you to know what my deepest fear is. It's this, this, and this for these reasons. And I'd like to know what your deepest fear is." No woman has ever said, "This is the best way to fight with me. Just so you know, we're statistically going to have fights if it's a healthy relationship. And that's great, but I want you to know how to get the best out of a fight with me. Because if you fight with me like this, it's going to be a big waste of all of our time. But if you would be so kind as to fight with me this way, boy, all kinds of insights will come out. And you'll this, and we'll get closer together. And so here's how to fight with me." No woman has ever said, "Dane, this would be a peak experience for me." No woman has ever said, "Dane, I'd like to have a relationship with you, that I'm attracted. However, I'm trying to break these two patterns." Now, the last 3-4 relationships I've been in, I've found myself feeling hyper-controlled by men, one, and at the same time, I don't know what their feelings are. And I'd like to break those two patterns. Now, what I'd like to know is, do you think we could break those patterns together? Or do you think you're a terrible partner for those patterns? Now, no woman has ever said that. Now, here's where it gets even worse. I've asked these questions hundreds of times. And I get a range of response. It's usually alarm. I have to confess, my goodness. Is he trying to catch me out already on all the things that I don't know in an emotionally illiterate culture? Alarm. But sometimes they say, "What a great question." Now, I don't know the answer because no one in the entire history of my life, I'm 65 years old. I often date older women. I'm 65 years old, and not a single man or woman has ever asked me that question in my entire life. Now, does that sound like a conspiracy of silence to avoid the most obvious and intelligent questions in any relationship? What makes you feel loved? How to fight with you? How to have a good ending? Do these sound like vague, arcane things that no one has to deal with? What your love language is? What your traumatic symptoms are? I didn't get around to asking that until I met my wife, because it took the stranger in a cafe to tell me what trauma was. So how does this give hope that the level of allowing from government to parents, to us as individuals, to therapists, to lovers, to your spiritual and relational communities, to acquaintances, to the public, and to businesses, are completely okay with not asking these things, not volunteering these things, and doing absolutely nothing to see that anyone else does. Let's just be fine with 1 in 3 domestic relationships, including domestic violence. Let's be okay with 1 in 7 Americans having a substance addiction. Let's be okay with 90% of Americans being addictive in their compulsive control of consciousness. You don't think beer, potato chips, and football might just steer you a little bit away from something sensitive and feminine and vulnerable? That's his point, isn't it? I mean, who cares about the head injuries? Who cares about the stupidity? Who cares that we're not even playing the fucking game? It's way more interesting than having a conversation with my wife. And don't you forget it. Now, so in the belonging, the loyalty that comes with giving someone the right to meet one's need for love and belonging, a rare commodity in our culture, they have influence. A therapist that you let into your deepest inner child and stuff has influence. And that influence can be used to love you or to abuse you. You know, in the Sherlock Holmes novels, there's that little innocent girl and you know, the pathological lover seduces her and then says, we're going to run away together, but you have to betray your father. You have to betray your family. You have to betray the law. You have to betray everything decent inside you, because that's the only way that we're going to run away together and I'll be your lover. And it's her first love. She's become infatuated. She's become addicted to the adrenaline. She doesn't know what love is. It's called the beryl coronet. So she takes the jewels that are going to cost the family their entire honor, and she gives them to the thief who is pretending to love her. And her brother, seeing that it's coming, tries and he breaks the coronet so that only half goes back to the father. And then the girl goes numb and silent as her father's heart is broken. And the brother takes the hit. The brother takes the hit to protect his father, because the little girl in that woman has his father's heart. And the fact that she could betray him for a criminal in such a way might break his heart, cost him his life. So the son lies and says that he did it and is taken away in prison. And so the daughter betrays the brother who's defending her to protect the illicit lover. So there's an influence when you give your loyalty, your vulnerability to a therapist, to a community, to a group. And that influence can be used to pull out the worst in you, to maintain, because you're loyal to the need, the human need to have love and belonging. And High's basic deal with me is you don't get a refund. Nobody knows about this. And you don't get any support to deal with this in the way that needs to be integrated. You give us this, we'll let you keep paying us money. You betray those rules, and you will not be welcome here. You will be disowned from the lists. You will be sued. You can't take a workshop or communicate easily, etc., because we're going to be there as the gatekeepers. And we're not going to validate what you're saying publicly. So who you are, your experience, and the fact that you have PTSD from these events and the fact that your finances are nope, it gets no public acknowledgement. Because we are the Human Awareness Institute, and we're committed to a world where everyone wins, except you. But everyone else wins, except us. But everyone else wins, except all the people we lie and betray by not telling the truth. And we don't want to learn about trauma. We don't want to learn about sexual abuse. We're just a school committed to healthy, loving relationships. God damn it, isn't that enough? We're loving. Isn't that enough? Why do we have to get bogged down in these details? And when your therapists turn on you with fear and hatred because you're going to tell the truth, with fear and hatred because you're looking out for the community, with fear and hatred because you value your feminine self more than your therapists. I mean, sure, they valued it as long as they were getting paid for it. But see, now the tables have turned, right? Now that we've sexually abused you, etc., you see, you're not interested in paying us anymore. You're interested in an apology. You're interested in taking up our time. See, now we have to pay money for your feminine side. And whoa, just a minute here. We may be therapists committed to human relations and all that. But just a minute here. You know, this is great progress that there are therapists at all. A few hundred years ago, you couldn't pay someone to listen to your feelings. Nobody had any money for something so feminine. And if you did, you were a bit quackish and all that. And now just look at you. There's all these therapists you can hire. And you can pay them to keep the secret of your feelings so that all the people in your life will remain ignorant about what you're feeling. Because you wouldn't want anyone to know, other than a therapist, who's bound by professional client privilege to secrecy. You wouldn't want anyone to know that was actually in your life. You don't want your wife listening to your actual feelings about her. Heaven forbid. The marriage might change. You could grow and evolve. My goodness, no. They're going to keep it secret. And so that influence, all at once, losing the community, all the praise, all of the validation that Ann Watts gave me during our sessions. What she said in the end was, it's not worth fighting for. It's not worth going public for. It's not worth my money. It's not worth my discomfort. When it comes right down to it, if you pay me money, I will take a stand for your feminine side. But if it might cost me money, I will betray my therapeutic ethics to put the patient first. See, because if I get into a spat with my buddy Peter by letting his secret come out and encouraging my patient to do the right thing, because the data is resoundingly clear, secrecy around sexual abuse does most of the damage. That there is no way for me to integrate back into my primary community when one of the biggest emotional and traumatic events of my life is a secret under a contract with my abusers and the community leadership, because they're the same thing, with a contract with my therapist, that my dignity, my into me you see, my truth and my feelings will be slaughtered to protect the egos and images of my teachers about healthy relationship. You cannot integrate sanely into that community, which means the community is lost as long as my teachers betray me, as long as my teachers betray themselves, as long as my teachers betray the community, as long as my teachers betray the U.S. government. In this case, nonprofit law is clear. You put public interest first. And we don't need a school taking public tax-free money to teach people how to shut up when their therapists abuse them and to cover it up. So we don't need that. but the amount of influence, because all that need, like, I really, really, really wanted to believe that my feminine soul was valued by my teachers, by my community. But when I wrote to my team, the people who talked about the room of love and why they were there and how they wanted to help people and that spouted the mission of a world where everyone wins and committed to this mission. You see, every team member at High committed to a mission of a world where everyone wins. And I'm telling them that I've been sexually abused by one of our joint teachers, and they say nothing. Not one team member offers to help when I wrote to all of them. This is a betrayal. It's the entire community lining up to say, yeah, it's a nice word, love and all that, and yes, the sex is very important. Good old chauvinism, it works, focus on the material. But we're not, your feelings being hurt, the feminine, I don't know if we're ready for that. Really? Policy, money, things changing because your soul, your feminine side, you have feelings? Really? Seems a bit feminine, right? A little questionable for a real man. And so the dynamic stays in place. The passive causation and allowing, the creation, by both causing, we're going to sue you if you do this, we're going to disconnect you from the email, we're going to sexually abuse you, we're going to not respond to this, we're going to refuse to do this. The causation, yes, on the part of the High facilitators. And the allowing in the parts of everyone else sees that the dynamic continues and that the world stays asleep. Asleep. I don't want to feel those things. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to get out of my little comfort zone. Can we just play another episode of Seinfeld, please? Oh, it's so nice, isn't it? Isn't it? Look at isn't it a cute little butt with his nice little thing? Oh, it's so lovely. And this is the circle. This is the circle of addictive abuse. And I want to talk a little bit about this relational, emotional, feminine side of the psyche, and also about this primary function of compulsion and addiction as a pain management strategy. It's primarily masculine, meaning most compulsive addictive thinking, feeling, behavior is masculine. It's assertively willed, done in some repetitive loop that ensures that we don't see something, that we don't feel something, that we don't be faced with something that's too big to deal. You know, like when you're 5 years old and you realize one of your parents is going to kill you if you tell some secret of theirs, that's too big to deal. Because the same parent is telling you to tell the truth and da-da-da. It's just, you saw the look in their eye. They want to kill you. But you have no place to go. It's too big to deal, so you got to push it aside. So now every time that thought gets near and you're about to face at 5 years old that your parent wants to kill you, there was no uncertainty in those eyes. You little shit, don't you dare tell this. I would kill you in a heartbeat. If you ruin this little game, this little affair, okay. Okay, now we can play and put on the performance. Aren't we happy? So go play with mom. Don't go play with mom. So there's this, it's too big to deal. So now every time the child's consciousness drifts towards that realization, they've got to become hyperactive. They've got to do all this stuff to distract against a grief, against a terror that they can't face. When you're in medical school and you can barely get through and you're working a job and you see the pink lipstick and you realize, oh, he's probably having an affair, but I don't have money for rent. I don't have, I can't, I just got to look the other way. In a couple of years, if the affair is still going on, I will have the strength to face this, but not now. You know, it's a horrendous cult that we have set up to create these moments over and over and over again with so many people. And you have no idea how close someone is to suicide because this is happening 3 times. They did this, they moved out, now the neighbor's doing the same thing. Now, you know, there are women who are haunted and hunted in this territory. And they are judged, of course, as bitchy, uncooperative, little frigid women or whatever if they don't do this and aren't smiling. As they're just down to their last dregs of halfway trying to be nice as one exploitation, this and that and the other. And they can't afford to look at the pain because they don't have the resources of sincere support to break down and deal with the grief and integrate it so that they can be stronger. Because whenever you divide the psyche, the way our cult does by having a cult horizon, whenever you divide the psyche, it's like taking a body and cutting it in half. Now, how long do you think the body would last if it was cut in half? Not very long. So you're not actually dividing the psyche. What you're doing is you're creating walls that stop your awareness and attention from going into half of who you are. Now, if half of who you are, or more, is invisible, first of all, you're going to feel pain because you long to feel whole. You long to be whole. Not in the truth of the wholeness, you can't stop from being whole, but in the ego's awareness. The ego can create a tunnel vision that can't see the other half of the self. Now, I can see out there, but I can't see over here because I've created a tunnel vision. The ego longs to be whole. It longs to be able to roam freely within the landscape of the psyche. It longs to be one with itself, with all those parts that have been pared off, pruned off, chucked off, burned, tormented, and thrown into the rubbish heap of the cult as part of that 102 metric tons of garbage. We create all that physical garbage over the course of a lifetime as an American, but we create just as much psychological garbage that we throw in the heap. Unimaginable resources of wealth that we lack the sophistication to turn back into life. Because no energy is created or destroyed, our physics teachers tells us. It's simply changed from one shape to another. And we're a cult that spends vast amounts of energy turning natural resources into stuff that we don't know what to do with. So we call it garbage and throw it in a hole in the ground. And we do the exact same thing inside. We spend vast amounts of energy creating an environment that elicits thoughts and feelings that have no place in the cult that elicited them. Pedophilia is one of them. You create regression in a traumatized young boy around romantic feelings, and he becomes terrified of grown-up, mature women because he's 5 years old emotionally. Well, as he's a teenager, his body still wants to explore sex, but not with a real scary woman, because he's 5 years old, emotionally. So he wants that with a safe person, someone else who's 5 years old, who's not scary, who's not going to shout and punish him and tell him what a shit he is like his mother. He wants, Oh, someone like you. You're like me. We're both scared little kids. Of course, the child sees a giant. But that's not how he feels. He doesn't feel like a giant. He feels like, oh, I'm 5 years old again with a safe person. My goodness, yes, I've got a teenage body. Yes, I'm curious about this, and I can show you this and that, and I know that mentally, but emotionally, I'm 5 years old. So the cult creates regressed, emotional, terrified men who have been so shamed in their feminine side that they're committed to staying emotionally separate from women, from the mother energy, from anything beautiful and majestic in the feminine, because all he sees is terror. So the only safe way into his feelings at all are when he's 5 years old. And who does he feel safe with? A 5-year-old. Oh, you. Nothing is, I'm not going to hurt you. We're just going to play together. But we don't know how to fix that. We know how to create that energy of sustained emotional abuse, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. You are now a pedophile. You're no longer a human being. You're a pedophile. Okay? So you're now a pedophile. Well, what are we going to do with you? Well, it's very simple. We're going to put up notices so that everyone will shame and avoid you. We're going to make sure that no children can play with you, the one group you can feel somewhat safe with. We're going to make sure that you feel like a bad person. Maybe we'll send you nasty letters so that little scared 5-year-old in there, make sure that they're really terrified. Maybe we'll beat the emotional 5-year-old in the grown-up body of the traumatized and abused male. But we will be clear. You are garbage. And the cult that created you, sustained parental abuse with zero government interference, let alone school or anything else, the cult that created you is going to punish you for being created, because that's the kind of dumb fucks we are. And we're just getting started. We create psychological garbage and individuals that we shame by calling psychological right and left. You lot are too emotional. Now, we created you, but we're not going to change our template, meaning we're a cult that stamps down on the dough and there's a Christmas tree. Now, we stamp down on you, we turn you into a cutout shape. Okay, good. You are now a Christmas tree. And then we say, why are you there? We don't like Christmas trees. We create this person, this person, this person, and this person. And then we go around complaining about them. We don't complain about the cutter. We don't complain about the cult template. We complain about homosexual men. We complain about transgender people. We complain about people who are too sensitive. We complain about people who are too emotional. We complain about people who are too slow. We complain about people who are too fast. We go through right and left until there's this little sliver, the little Seinfeld sliver, right? There's our little, that's what I like. He's rich. Got a cute butt. Fit that. That's okay. Everything else, get rid of it. That's what creates a cult of garbage. 102 metric tons of garbage per person per lifetime. What does that mean about the amount of garbage, the amount of the soul, the spirit, the psyche of our inner personas that end up in the shadow terrain of our dark and light denied self, because we, juvenile cult that we are, don't know what to do with it, let alone how to harvest it into creating a dream of miracles and beauty. A dream. There is so much energy tied up in the suppressed domains of the psyche. Because you can't kill them. You can just block awareness, which means that they're influencing you, but you can't see the influence because you won't look. You can't look because it's traumatizing. And it's traumatizing because your cult is committed to turning all these different vast resources within into something scary and horrible, the terror of the unknown. A replica, a fractal pattern of the terror of being born into this cult, to be brutalized, to be shamed, to watch other people brutalized and shamed, to watch the homeless day by day being shamed. And so we want to feel good. We don't want to feel bad. And how do we do that? Well, one thing that we can do is to learn more and become more educated. The more knowledgeable a person, the more sophisticated their paradigm. You may say that ants, for example, are horrible scourges on the earth and blah, blah, blah. And then you learn that ants create an interesting psychedelic substance, and they do this and this and this, and they teach us about this and this and this, and they do this on the forest, and they make this and this and this. And you realize, there's a positive and a negative side to ants. Because you've learned something. You've learned to go from the myopia of cult thinking to the sophistication of scientific or ecological thinking. The more scientific you are, the more ecologically you think. Because you cannot be a good scientist without following the trail between everything and every other thing. They are scientifically interconnected. Now, we do this very bizarre thing where the cult tries and teaches our scientists to compartmentalize. No, we want you to be a scientist. We don't want you to be a philosophical scientist. We don't want you to wax philosophical. I mean, give us a break. That's a little bit poetic, a little bit feminine. But, if you could just don't worry about how the whole fits and just focus on, how do you split an atom in a way that could blow up a city? Or how could we twist this drug so we could extend the patent and make another billion and still do the same thing the old drug did, but claim it has new powers? How could we do that? That's just focus on that one thing. Don't focus on the fact that the breath is connected to the trees, and the trees are connected to the law of gravity, and the law of gravity is connected to the entire multiverse, and the entire multiverse also has the strong and weak force, and then light from 200 million years ago is coming to... Don't worry about all that. You can't make money with that stuff. You just learn to think ecologically, and that's not what we want. You're doing this and this only, and that's what we pay for you. So get to work. So you want to feel good. You don't want to feel bad. You can do that inwardly by developing your paradigm, developing your meditative capacity, etc., developing your intelligence. And the more intelligent you are, the more you start to appreciate simple things. Oh my gosh, it had to rain on my birthday. Oh my gosh, nature has been doing the same thing it's been doing for billions of years, and water keeps plants alive. It's not all about you. You see, there are other things in the ecology that are balanced out. If it was always sunny days, then you would be dead with heat wave and no food and blah, 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 no water and all that stuff. So blessings on the rain and blessings on the sun. Now we're starting to deal with sophistication. We're getting closer to the Chinese thing where the yin and yang are part of a whole, where one is not bigger than the other, and where one links ultimately the other. If you follow yin to the ultimate extreme, it becomes yang. If you follow the feminine to the ultimate extreme, it becomes masculine, and vice versa, this wonderful dance between the two. Because while we divide the world into masculine and feminine to create human consciousness through distinction based on language, it's not actually how the universe is. It is an interconnected ecology. So sex, money, work, busyness, food, media, and even love, if it's cuddles or kisses or words of love, little dopamine hits, are external mechanisms that help us to feel good. And when we need external stuff as the primary source for feeling good, because our cult has abandoned its responsibility, its ability to respond to our emotional illiteracy, our traumatic illiteracy, our psychological illiteracy, our mythological illiteracy, all the different sciences that could help us create well-being from within. When these have been negated and abandoned systematically and willfully, and nobody wants to listen. City government, hey, why aren't our kids learning mythology in the local school? We don't know and we don't care. School, why aren't you teaching this and this? We don't know and we don't care. I had an interesting dynamic with a local Waldorf teacher around homelessness. And it boiled down to this. He didn't want me to give a talk for free on homelessness, even though several of his kids had asked and were interested in homelessness. Why? He said, here's the thing. I can think of several parents amongst all the parents who would not like their children knowing the truth about homelessness. Now, the other parents and the kids, of course, would be very interested in this. But we can't leave those kids out of the class. And I don't want to argue with those parents to advocate for the kids, because those parents will go to the principal and complain to me that I'm damaging their children by telling them the truth, and that a child's fragile innocence shouldn't be shattered, even at 8, 9. So even at 8, 9, 10, it's just too much. Even 11, 12, 13, it's too much to put children's right to know, right to begin preparing for life, and responsibility. In order to have the ability to respond, you have to have information. You have to have an accurate map of reality. And in order to be confident responding effectively, you have to have experience and practice. And this is a little microcosm into why our children are leaving ignorant of the things that are most important in their life, with little or no experience responding to the most important things in their life. And with teachers who have agendas of avoiding fear of apparent minority, that exceed the agenda to educate, to draw out that which is the best in the child. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, and there was a break in the SD card, which stops recording when it gets low apparently, and didn't show, and so kind of piecing a few things. So I want to talk about responding to pain in the outer way, in the masculine way, and in the inner way. So to respond to pain in the outer way, if you've got a neighbor that rapes you, sending them to prison, moving to another neighborhood, etc., and letting someone else be raped, is a way to mitigate that. If you are feeling anxious and in pain, eating sugar, taking cocaine, taking MDMA, something that makes you feel better, etc., is a response in the outer way. If you're feeling lonely and anxious, having sex may, be a response in the outer way. If you're feeling anxious, masturbating compulsively or watching pornography. So these are some of the outer ways to deal with addiction: sex, money, work, busyness, food, media, love, pornography, etc. This is changing the outer environment to manage pain. Now, it's really important to distinguish in this domain of pain management. There are three important distinctions. One is healing the pain. Now, to heal is to restore wholeness. In this case, what we're restoring is, and healing is, the gap between that which is longed for and that which is. I long to feel abundant about money. I feel absolutely scared shitless. There's a gap there. It's pretty big. Abundance, scared shitless. I'm here. I want to be here. Pain is the measure of the gap. To heal pain, one must work on the underlying gap. So if you want to feel abundant about money, for example, and you feel scared shitless, then there's a couple of different things that you can do. You can spend less money, save more money. Now, this, if it's a rational fear, because you're living close to the edge, will help. But if it's a traumatic fear based on the past, it will not. You can be a miser billionaire and be terrified of losing it all. John D. Rockefeller, the wealthiest man in history by some estimations, a trillionaire. In today's dollar, John D. Rockefeller, Sr., was so poor, was so miserable around money, that in one storm, and this was just illustrative of his mindset, in one storm, he's in his insurance office, and he doesn't know if his boat's going to sink because, it's a big storm out there, and this is a cross-Atlantic, journey, and so he's deciding whether to pay the premium on the insurance for his ship, and he's got to make the decision before the news of the ship sinking comes in. And so he's pacing up and down. Is the storm getting better? Should he pay the premium? Should he not pay the premium? If the ship succeeds, he will have wasted $800, a fortune in today's money. A fortune. He will have wasted $800 on an insurance premium. But on the other hand, if it goes down and he loses $20,000, a fortune in today's, then it'll be even worse. What should he do? And he's pulling on his hair. His hair actually started to fall out from sheer stress. He's the kind of guy that when they were soldering the oil cans together, he'd go up to the worker and say, "How many drops of solder do we use on our oil cans, to can up our oil?" And the worker says, 32. He says, "Do it with 31. Do it with 31. I'm sure we can get by with 31." And so he's micromanaging, every aspect to save every penny. He's the richest man in history. So having another billion isn't going to cut it for John D. Rockefeller. We're dealing with an inner trauma that no amount of addictive money-making can satiate. He has an addiction. He's told as a man how to solve his pain is to make more and more money, so he's doing what he's told. He's very passive in that way. He's not questioning his cult. His cult says the measure of a man is how rich and powerful and how many employees and how many people he can boss around. So he's got the biggest commercial venture in history, bigger than Vanderbilt, bigger than Chase and Morgan, and he's got it. The richest man. So, making another billion, not the prescription for Rockefeller. But if you're $50,000 in debt and your credit card bills are climbing, and your income is unstable, then, doing something on the outer region to feel a little better about money could be the trick. And on the other hand, if you're, no matter how much money you are, the more you fear you're going to lose, then that's not going to cut it. Then money has to be turned back into something. For example, in a cult like ours where you realize that you don't have value, money does. It could mean you're desperate about losing love. And you realize that if you don't have money, you won't be loved, but you're really aware of the fragility, because even if you do have money, you're not loved for you. You're loved because you make people comfortable by having money. And so they're not going to have to bail you out, etc. And so, this is a fragility, particularly in America, that they don't have in Denmark. Because in Denmark, the welfare underpinnings of the culture, from paid maternity leave to paid job retraining to paid to go to college to paid health care to every aspect of a quality life, housing provided if necessary, unemployment, you're basically going to live. You're going to survive, you're going to feel secure, and you're going to have love and belonging and self-esteem, regardless of what you do in Denmark. And it actually, I didn't meet anyone who was unemployed. Screw all the dogma you're told about, how if the welfare state gets so big, everyone will take advantage and nobody will work. No, every single person I interviewed in Denmark had a job that they loved, because they picked it with care based on a passion and a strength that they had, and they were college educated, and so they wanted to be good at it, et cetera, et cetera. And so in that dynamic, there's no trauma. And when you're not afraid of being asked for money by a friend who's on the street or become an addict or something, then you don't suddenly abandon all your friends when they're needy, which is what we do in the US. As soon as someone gets hit with a $200,000 medical bill and can't work and all that, most of their friends drift off because they don't want to help financially. And there's no safety net. And it just is going to be really awkward if someone's in pain and poor, etc., for no particular reason, and we're all just enjoying ourselves. So let's just move away and ignore them. Because it was awfully rude of them to have that car accident, and let's just move along and not talk about why, because then we'd look a little bit cowardly, which we are. But let's not talk about that, and off we go. And so there's a stronger social network, because friends aren't chosen based on, are you likely to ask me for money? And I had that happen with a friend of mine, quote unquote, in the US recently, where I wanted to share, the excitement of some art projects, etc. And he knew what was going on with high and the various things and the PTSD. And so he said, I'm not sure we should meet because I'm not going to give you any money. It's like, you fucking bastard. You have no idea. You have no idea. But the most important thing on your mind is not paying any money. That's it. And that's sad. That's sad in our cult. And I don't fault him for the candor. That is unusually positive, because it provides a doorway for me to express how pissed off I am. That's what he's kind of turning me into. And one of the things we do with chauvinism is, if you are in these feminine categories, you have things like transcendent experiences, and people don't like this. This is when you start to feel as one. No, no, no. Keep to yourself. I'll keep to myself. None of that oneness thing. And another kind of thing that happens when you enter feminine terrain in virginal personas because they weren't allowed at 2 years old. They weren't allowed at 5 years old. They were certainly not allowed at 15 years old. This cult hates many feminine personas. And so when you enter them, it's like driving a new car for the first time. You haven't learned regulation skills. And so they're out of control. Well, this cult hates being out of control, withholds sex from people who are out of control. Alcohol is okay, fine. Men liquor women up to fuck them, that's acceptable. But to be out of control in feminine terrain, particularly as a man, not very cool. Trauma and shame are in feminine dimensions. We're dealing with emotions. We're dealing with feelings. We're dealing with the body. We're dealing with felt experience. Desperation, need, and codependency are in feminine terrain. Now, one of the ways that I measure the strength of an American woman is how willing she is to own desperation. Because in a chauvinistic cult such as our own, where certain personas in the feminine side of the psyche are going to be devalued, ignored, marginalized, humiliated, apologized for, uninvited, etc., this is going to create scarcity at the level of desperation in the psyche, in the persona, in some of the personas that are most feminine. And this sometimes comes out in sexuality, thank goodness. It sometimes comes out in falling in love, thank goodness. It sometimes comes out despite the cult's best efforts to lock it down. And if a woman can own desperation and articulate it with honor, that's a pretty rare and beautiful sight in a chauvinistic cult. Because what she's saying is the part of my feminine psyche, what he is saying is the part of my feminine psyche that has been most starved, that has been most sublimated, that has been most sacrificed on the masculine altars of efficiency and capitalism and chauvinism and rage. This persona is making an appearance. It is rising in consciousness. And I am representing this persona, an honored guest. An honored guest. Here I am. This is a profound act of respect. And I appreciate it. I note it. And I prioritize it. In a culture that honors the feminine, the more emotional a topic is, the more vulnerable a topic is, the more needy the feeling is, the more the state and the persona that represents that state is prioritized. Because this is the distinction between empathy and sociopathic behavior. Empathic behavior looks for the strongest, most vulnerable feelings and says, you're it. Let's all put our attention on you. Because that is a culture and an environment that makes feeling safe and makes feeling a positive experience and makes trusting others to include them in those feelings a healing experience. Whoever has the strongest, most intense feelings gets prioritized. Now, in a sociopathic cult, the idea is not to prioritize, grow, or honor feelings, because those are feminine. And the goal is instead to silence, shut down, discourage, and exclude and shame feelings. And so the exact opposite is the protocol. The person who has the strongest feelings, who has the most out of control feelings, who has the most shame, the most desperation, and the most need, is banished by pretending she's not there, by glowering at her, by willfully changing the subject to other things like, oh, you went shopping at Macy's. How amazing, amazing. Oh, and you bought another useless gadget. Wow, wow, great. Did you hear this? So-and-so just bought another useless gadget. Isn't it amazing? Now, let's make very clear that the feelings that were about to be said are not welcome. Let's make that very clear. A useless gadget that no one is actually very interested in is worth pretending that it is interesting, just to avoid the discomfort of being in feminine terrain. And this will kill the feminine as effectively as withholding water from a segment of plants. If you say any plant with green singular leaves, we're just not going to water. And all these plants with brown leaves or red leaves or maroon and orange leaves, we're going to water those. Some die out, some grow. It's based on the watering. It's based on the gardener that decides, and we are all gardeners for one another. And so when a woman tells me that she's not needy, she's not desperate, she's not one of those women, she doesn't have any baggage. Amazingly, she's been on the planet 50 years, but no memories, no intense feelings, nothing unresolved, no craziness from this or that insane part of the culture. No. She's just got a little handbag and ready to go in the moment, right? Well, this is never true. What it usually means is that she's very good at skirting the surface and playing a chameleon pleaser persona who doesn't have very many feelings because it's not real. As soon as you get deep into the water, suddenly she does have feelings and will usually apologize for them before rushing off. We have the three distinctions of healing the pain, doing something that heals the underlying gap. I'm separate from, and I long for this. For example, my elbow's in pain. I long for free expression of my arm. I long to be able to type again. I long to be able to write with my right hand. I long to be able to stretch my arm all the way out, to bring it all the way in. I will long to be able to bend my elbow without feeling pain. And with a broken radial head and a broken scapoid bone in the wrist, that's not happening. I long for it, and it's not happening. Well, healing that pain is about doing physiotherapy and taking time and exercising it and rubbing arnica into the wound and doing massages and hot Epsom salt baths. That's healing the underlying pain. Of course, having done the surgery and all of that. So that's one distinction. So when you're in pain, you can heal the pain. If you long to be alive and vital, but you just keep eating potato chips into obesity, healing the underlying pain is discipline. Cutting out carbohydrates, not so much sugar, not so much dairy and wheat, eating more protein, eating whole foods, watching the pounds go down rather than go up. That's healing the pain. So there's healing the pain. There's also distraction and addiction to cope with the pain. I'm going to stay at 5-star hotels instead of 3-star hotels. I'm going to stay up all night binge watching Netflix. I can't feel any pain when I'm doing that. I may feel shit in the next day, but then I'll just sleep through it and I won't feel any pain there. I might get drunk and then sleep through the next day and get drunk again. I'm going to distract from the pain. So we've got the anesthetics and drugs of busyness, of this and that and the other. And I do want to draw attention in this category of compulsive behavior to distract from pain, because there is a distinction in this category that's been useful to me and can be useful to you as well, perhaps. If you understand that compulsive behavior is pain management, it's really consciousness control. What you're doing is avoiding attention going into this segment of the psyche that's in enormous amounts of pain that has not been dealt with because it's below the event horizon of the cult. Then you've got actually a couple of options, because if you understand instinctively or literally what you're trying to avoid. I can't think of my mother. I can't think of when I was 2 years old. I can't think about being raped. You understand what you're avoiding that you don't know how to deal with at an ego level. You've got a range of avoidance tactics. You can be really, really busy and work 12-hour days. When I was recovering from the high scandal at its peak, the pain and grief was too intense as I drifted off to sleep. So I would create an artificial jet lag by changing my sleep rhythm every single day, so I was constantly dissociated. And this would create the kind of fog that I suspect many drunk people get without the alcohol, which actually doesn't agree with me. And so creating a dissociated, somewhat numbed state in that way let me manage the pain. But the point is, I had options. I could eat too much. I'm sure I could have numbed out on opioids and things like that. That just didn't seem like a great option. And so I chose sleep dissociation and eating too much. So I put on 20 pounds, eating too much, deliberately as pain management, because I didn't know how to respond to the pain fast enough. I was in so much pain, so intense, and so much of it was out of my control, because when I had control was when I chose high as my community. When I didn't have control is when they escalated the psychedelic dose, when they showed up late for the session, when they made a promise they didn't keep, when I got angry about that, and rather than validating the anger, they dissociated from me, then cut off communication, in email, then pretended that weren't available for integration, then denied that it was a high issue, then refused to apologize. Then Peter apologized, but refused to do anything about it. And then Sarah apologized, and then Sarah Sandel, and then said, but you should know that I will always put my husband first, even though you're my therapeutic client, and even though I let you down, just so you know, I will always put your abuser, my colleague and husband that I recommended to you, I'll put his need for secrecy and control ahead of your need for well-being, just so you know. That's how safe you are as my therapeutic client, as my participant, as a member of my community. You see, and this, of course, did not make me feel safe. It left me feeling incredibly lonely and betrayed, because it was the same old parental shit just reenacted by my therapist for money. My parents abused me for free. My therapist abused me for money. Ironically, as this brought up the whole parental dynamic again, I confronted my mother because she's still doing the same thing to my younger siblings, and they're hurting over it. But they don't have the guts to tell her about it because they're worried about her feelings. She, the parent, is not worried about their feelings. They, the depressed, addicted, compulsive, pain-managing adult children of, are worried about her feelings. The abuser. Well, that's not a good split. That's not a good... That doesn't lead to evolution. That leads to devolution. That's evil. When the giants betray and prey on the young, when the therapists prey on the patient, when the business service provider exploits the client, when the government uses and abuses its people, when the archetype of the ultimate deity is a punishing, sociopathic, insane mess of a man, you're not evolving, you're devolving. When the parents eat the child, you have devolution. You are sacrificing the future. You're going into debt. You're sacrificing the future to protect a dysfunctional past. When you sacrifice, and similarly, when the therapist, the government, the leaders, the man, the masculine sacrifices to protect the innocence, the beauty, the truth of the feminine. Not females, the feminine in men and in women, the innocence, the trust. You have evolution. And you are healing pain. You are healing pain. So you have doing stuff that heals pain, and this video is one of them, because I feel pain that no one's ever offered me this video to watch. I don't know that it exists, but now it does. And I've already watched it. I'm watching it now. I'm looking at the same screen that you are. And I'm seeing a guy that gives a damn about truth, about substance, about the inner feminine, and is going to take a Sunday to honor what has not been honored for thousands of years in this cult. That's what I see, and I like what I see. So I have a little bit less pain. So there's the distinction of that which heals the gap. It heals the gap between that which is longed for and that which is. Because pain is the separation from and the longing for. If you're disgusted by it, I hate my body and want nothing to do with it, I wish I could break all my bones, well, then you're not longing for wholeness. You're longing for dissociation. And so, but if you are separate from something that you long for, you will be in pain. And it is important to respond to pain by healing it to the best that we are able. You know, when I saw Julian Assange being persecuted by my government with my tax money in a whole host of bizarre and unethical ways, I got pissed because I'd like to have a government that actually followed its own principles, much as I'd like to have a high leadership that follows its mission instead of its fears and its ignorance and shame and ego needs. I'd like to have a country that was the land of the free rather than we can't have this independent news organization pointing out that we shoot down Reuters people from helicopters, making our politicians look embarrassed when their hypocritical emails are published, pointing out this, pointing out Abu Ghraib. We can't have people making us look bad by telling the truth. Shut them down. Shut them down. But I want a world of truth. And so I gave money to Julian. Not enough, obviously. The U.S. government managed to harass him into this and this and this and this and break the law and bribe a new Peruvian dictator. This is an interesting story of how exactly fanatical we are about suppressing the truth, but there you are. Still, doing something, letting Julian know that I appreciate his sacrifice, that I value who he is as a human being, that he's made this choice on principle. Nobody gets stayed away from their family and takes this route against the U.S. government unless they care, and nobody goes head-to-head with a corrupt power structure like High for fun. It's not particularly fun. It's just more fun than being invisible and having everything beautiful and sacred in me turned into an enemy and buried by a community of teachers that pledge to teach about love. It's not loving. It doesn't help my survival, doesn't help my security, doesn't help my love and belonging or my esteem to be buried as a dirty secret to protect my abuser. No, it doesn't feel very loving. And I don't want the next person dealing with that the way I'm dealing with it as a shock, because I didn't see it coming, you see. And so that's the healing, is to get, I don't think anyone could watch this video and really think about it and not see the next wave of abuse coming. Because that's part of the point, to bring light in dark places. Within, without, they're the same. They're fractal patterns. We all deal with these shadow elements. So we have these terrains within the psyche that are fundamentally undervalued. That's painful. And so part of it is rejecting the cult and understanding what a cult is. A cult is not scientific. A cult is not healthy. It's not in your interest. A cult is a self-referential dogma that does not stand on science or reference the outside world with data. It references itself. I'm the greatest because I said I'm the greatest. Because I said I'm the greatest, I am the greatest. Therefore, I am the greatest. Doesn't get more self-referential than that. Our cult is particularly good at this kind of dogma, as America is the greatest at obesity. It is the greatest amongst the developed nation at having no national maternity leave at all. Pretty unique. It's one of the greatest at high healthcare costs. It's one of the greatest at imprisoning its people significantly. It's one of the greatest at spending more money on military budgets than anyone else proportionally. It's the greatest at that. But is that the greatest in terms of intelligence or in well-being, or the greatest at being loving or being healthy or being happy? Well, not so much, you see. So you don't want to get caught in a self-referential loop. You want to look at the data. And then you can look out at other data sets and say, oh my goodness, they have much more sustainable energy over in Copenhagen. They have more free time for family in Copenhagen. They have better health care in Copenhagen. You get paid to go to college in Copenhagen. People have jobs that they love. I interviewed 30 for 30. 30 for 30. All employed, happily. I can't find 30 random Americans that are all employed happily. I can find 30 Copenhagens, very, very, very easy. So you look at data. So you have healing the underlying pain, which takes skill in understanding what it is and discipline and effort and some ability and stuff. And you have distraction from the pain, jet lag, overeating, opioids, sex, binge watching, cigar smoking, whatever. You have distractions from pain. In this distraction category, you have what might be called positive distractions and destructive distractions. And I'll give you a couple examples. When I was doing 6 hours of therapy a week, I was doing that addictively. Now, I knew that because I thought, look, I am compulsive, and that means there's something locked in there that I don't fully understand. Well, how am I going to understand it? What does this cult have to offer? Well, there's these group of people called therapists that will listen to whatever you say if you pay them enough money. Okay, fine, we'll go over and see them. So I had 3 different therapists, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 2 hours each, 6 hours a week of therapy. And I figured that if I was going to addictively do something, this would be a good addiction because I might learn something. And if I learned and did enough addictive therapy, I might discover what the addiction was all about. Well, unfortunately, all of my therapists didn't understand addiction, didn't ask about it, didn't do this, so I didn't learn that much about it. But I did learn a lot about other things, including various things in myself, and also a lot about the therapeutic industry. And I was also interested in strengths and weaknesses between therapists, particularly in the energetic healer types, because, for example, little factoid, of the 3 psychics and intuitives that I've worked with in the last while, one is Peter Sandhill, who told me that the most luminous future in my entire life, and he kept saying this for months as the relationship snowballed into hell. He had no interest in actual data. He had a vision, and it was important that he stay true to this vision and not be sullied by facts and details such as how's the relationship actually working. It's one way of doing psychic work. So he kept on and on about how marrying this woman, who was one of the most inappropriate women I had ever met, was my luminous future. He kept going when she physically abused me. He kept going when the family was up in arms about it. He kept going when the family wanted me to buy her for $30,000. No problem. It's the most luminous future imaginable. And after I recovered, and after she recovered from what was an incredibly dysfunctional relationship, I asked him about it, and he said, oh, well, was the most luminous future that I saw for you. It's like kind of like I had my gift. You fucked it up, unfortunately, but, I can't have great clients with everyone. If you had been a better client, you no doubt would be happily married to this incredibly inappropriate partner for you. But you ruined my psychic vision, and gosh, it's going to take me some time to recover. I'm not going to refund or apologize in any way. Now, I understand it cost you $60,000. I understand there were miserable times in your life. I understand that you tried my vision multiple times and blah, 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 and she was suicidal and you felt the worst you'd ever felt, and now you don't even want to go to Thailand anymore. It's such a miserable reminder of what happened. It used to be your favorite country, but, there it is. So that's Peter Sandhill and Weepa. Now, right before that, we had Steve. Before that, we had Peter DeVries, who does constellation work. Now, he wanted me to marry Honeylyn. He said, yeah, I think that's a really great match to you. He was doing constellation work. And I said, well, Peter, it's like she doesn't seem that into it. I have PTSD. She abandons me in that place all the time. It seemed I get hurt basically continuously in that relationship. And so I've stepped back. I don't want to keep getting hurt. I've never met anyone who hurt me like that, and it just suddenly changed. And he said, well, maybe if you pay her mother, a salary so that their mother will support you and this and that, but it just feels great. And so I tried that and ended up spending a lot more money and just getting hurt again. And then so we're in 3 women in a row here. These are the psychic powers at work of our great psychics. So having gone from Peter's $60,000 brilliant vision to have the most miserable thing, we're now on to the next Peter, DeVries, and his vision of how to solve this great connection with a woman I actually did really love and would have loved if she was as into me as I was into her. that just was not happening. I think my PTSD, when you have PTSD caused by your therapist and you don't have a support framework, you're all over the place. Well, Hanlin, I think, was scared by that. So, very understandable. And I didn't want to push it. I like trying to find what actually fits. So I pulled out of the attempt to woo Honeylin, because when it came right down to it, she did not feel safe enough to fall in love. And so she never did fall in love. I did. And for her, and it just really hurt with that insecure attachment dynamic. It just really hurt. And so then I met a woman that I had an intuition about. It wasn't a romantic intuition. It was just an intuition that I could be useful to her. And she's now my wife. And I talked with Steve Orsery, my, channel energy healer, bioenergy balancing, all this. I'd worked with him for like 10 years. And he thought Jen was a terrible idea. Oh, your higher self doesn't, no, this kind of thing doesn't work out. No, your higher self doesn't like her, your future self, no, I'm muscle testing, no, get rid of her. It's bad news. Well, I said, this is interesting, Steve. You're psychic number 3 in this triage of disasters. And so-and-so was so excited about Weepa, which was the worst of the lot. And then there was Honeylin, who I was really into, and the other guy kept saying she'd be into, but I didn't think it would work out, because it's unusual for someone to completely change their approach. They usually reveal who they are and what they're up to and want in the first little bit. And they usually stay consistent with that. And I don't normally argue with that. I don't, expect some big transformation, so I'm not going to do that.